There's something to me about the Renault Kangoo being added, especially now in Gran Turismo's current climate, with the almost total focus on esports from Kaz's perspective and this demand for realism and all that kind of stuff, to the point where they've even redesigned entire racetracks to try and make them presumably get taken more seriously by FIA or whoever. It's weird to have these real-world normal vehicles added. And it's not that Gran Turismo doesn't use road cars, of course they do, but in the current climate of Sport and 7, it seems more obvious to have road cars that are high performance, supercars, sports cars, maybe at a stretch, super saloons and hot hatches, but beyond that, you don't really need low-level real-world stuff in the game. And more often than not, when it is included in the game, it feels pretty much shoehorned in, like you're either going to use it in the same 5 Sunday Cup events over and over again, or maybe if it's lucky, it'll have a Suzuki Jimny-style repetitive event that shows up seemingly every other week in the seasonal events for no apparent reason. Those just don't feel necessary to the current experience of Gran Turismo, and although I feel like every part of me should be rejoicing about having stuff like Unamogs and Kangoos and High Medics and High Aces, I just don't really feel that same warmth in me that I used to have for Gran Turismo to see these normal real-world cars, because the game itself is different now. So even though many of us have been asking for these kind of things for a long time, now that they're finally here, it's a mixed bag, and I don't know if it's just me that feels this way. I'm sure some of you do as well, because I know that for many of you who are not happy about vehicles like this being added, of which there are plenty of people, it's not so much that you hate the car, it just feels like a mismatch of priorities. You know, why would you add this now? Why would you add this in this game? Why would you add this as part of a update where there's only 3 vehicles and the attention is really focused in on all 3 of them, which makes the car seem bad, which is unfair to the car? These are all legitimate questions, and yet here we are, with the Kangoo added over 3 years into the life of GT7. It does to me, as I said, feel like a winding down kind of update, which is odd because we have absolutely no news yet of a next game. So either it's going to be a sparse future for Gran Turismo, or it will just be one of those ebbs and flows, those valleys and peaks between you have a really good update and maybe some fairly boring ones, or maybe none at all. All of that aside though, the Kangoo is here, so whether or not you want to use it is then down to you. In career mode, you can use it, there's no real need to, there are plenty of other cars which are better, similar price, and as I said in my overarching review, you definitely have to be careful for how you modify this one. In fact, if you compare the car in that video with nearly 300 horsepower, fully built, struggling to beat vehicles around Brands Hatch, whereas now around Laguna Seca I'll reduce the power down to like 140, so in other words remove the turbo and the intercooler, and yet it's handling way better and taking on cars which it shouldn't really be able to. And what's the change? 20mm of ride height. That's literally the only difference. Everything else was the same, I just made it a bit higher. This car, the Aston, not so much the Mazda, but certainly some others in the past as well, the Sierra RS500, the Porsche 911 GT3 RS, they do suffer from really unruly responses to suspension height if you go too low. In the case of this one, if you do keep it about 20 or so millimeters higher than the lowest, you should be okay. It still of course has that signature front-wheel drive chassis understeer, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, it's not a performance car, so you do have to remember that. You can put as many mods into it as you want, it's never going to handle like an Espace F1, because it just isn't one, it's still a Kangoo. For, again, people who own one of these, I'm sure you're over the moon, or if you know somebody who does, because there's so many of these around. So yeah, it's a cute, fun addition. It's just the kind of car that when we saw it in the silhouettes, it's like, huh? Why? Why is that being added? Whereas if it was in the game from day one, you wouldn't even bat an eye. In fact, I think for many of us, if you, for example, logged into a Gran Turismo 8, let's say, and you popped through the car dealers, as I do first, to see all the new vehicles in the game, if you popped into Renault and saw this, you'd be like, wow, that's hilarious. I love the fact that that's in the game. But something about reframing that as an update vehicle, well, yes, updates, people like to frame them as this free thing, this bonus content that you're getting down the line. Well, okay, let's say that we agree with you and give you that point. That's still a really weird choice to focus all of that attention on something like this, which you can't be dumb enough to think isn't going to ruffle feathers. You have to know that players are going to be like, what the hell is this thing? And why have you added it to the game? Sure, the Aston is a bit more obvious. This and the Mazda, though, definitely not, and they are very much so relics of an older time in Gran Turismo. It almost feels to me, to be honest, like Kaz himself has some kind of battle with other people in control of polyphony, or even within himself, I don't know, where he is clearly, more so than anything, interested in the next thing, the future, the next development, making it more realistic. Sophie, virtual reality, and especially top tier esports, Group 3, Group 1, all that kind of stuff. But then the game itself was marketed and pushed and feels like it's trying to appeal more to the traditional Gran Turismo fan, those of us who loved Gran Turismo 1 through 6, and the game kind of delivers some of that, but really not when you compare it to the older ones. So overall, a strange occasion. It's a car which has some potential, as I said, nearly 300 horses, 880 kilos or so that sounds pretty good on paper. In reality, you have to know what you're getting into. I think for most of us, you're not going to be expecting too much from the car because it is just a normal little van at the end of the day. So of course, all that's left to talk about is the Mazda, and if you haven't checked out the Aston review from yesterday, of course that one's up on the channel, as well as my overall thoughts on the update as a whole. But for now, thanks for watching.